You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
Hey everyone, welcome back. You're listening to the Break Podcast on Career Cloud Radio. I'm your host, Michael Garden. I'm a student of how we as people can change. The Break is dedicated to that moment when we finally make a change and forge a new path with our career. In 2008, work wasn't working for me, so I literally broke it. I started a side hustle, which you're listening to now. And slowly, over a year, I engineered my way out of corporate life. I envisioned a work life where I could thrive by being me, be creative, and center everything around my top priority, my family. Now, each week, I deconstruct the art and science behind change with examples from my own experiences and by bringing you deep conversations with amazing people who decided to break their careers and design a better life. My third guest of 2023 is Teddy Mitrosilis. Teddy is a former D1 athlete. He played baseball at the University of North Carolina, and then he took his two passions, sports and writing, and built a career in sports media, starting with ESPN. Somewhere along the line, as most of us come to find out, Teddy realized how he was using his talents wasn't as impactful as it could be. He worked for a startup for a while, where he built the confidence to later go out on his own. Today, Teddy combines his unique skills to help executives become better digital writers and build powerful brands online. Pulling lessons from the worlds of athletics, leadership, and the military, Teddy's built quite a following of his own digital writing. What enabled Teddy to parlay his experience into a business where he is creative, fulfilled, and in control? He says it's consistency. And consistency is all about the process. This episode is packed with great insights about adversity, courage, and being consistent. Plus, Teddy shares from his experiences training with Navy SEALs and climbing the equivalent height of Mount Everest. I'm so happy to have gotten to know Teddy over the past few months. You can find him writing daily on LinkedIn and Twitter or at theprocess.com. This is The Break, and you are listening to Becoming Prolific Through Process with Teddy Mitrosilis. I hope you enjoy it. This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. Teddy, welcome to the show. So glad to have you.
Thanks, Mike. Pleasure to be here, brother.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. We've been able to kind of network and get to know each other online. Following your lead, you reached out to me first, which was awesome. And it's been super cool to see kind of your growth and evolution over just the few months that I've seen you. And so I'm excited to unpack a little bit of that for our audience. My first question is about sports. So you played baseball at University of North Carolina, correct?
Yeah.
I try to play baseball at the collegiate level. It's probably another conversation for another time. But do you have a favorite moment that stands out from your time as a D1 athlete?
It's a good question. I played at a junior college first, so I had a very different background. The most of my teammates at Carolina were absolute studs. I was not an absolute stud. I was a junior college stud for 2 years, and then got to Carolina and played a year at Carolina. My favorite memory or moment playing at Carolina, this is very cliche, but it just is what it is it's all of the little moments in between all of the games. We had a tough year that year. We had a great team, a lot of talent. We got to the Oklahoma Regional in Norman and lost there. And it was disappointing because I thought we had the talent to be a College World Series caliber team, and we just didn't put it together. So from that perspective, like the season was disappointing, but the moments and the lessons and the relationships learned through that experience were incredible. And I personally had a very hard year, went through a lot of personal challenges as an athlete on and off the field, which we can get into. I'm happy, a lot of lessons there. So I look back on that time as one of huge growth. And it really took me kind of years later to appreciate the process and the memories. But by far, like the relationships made with teammates and coaches are some of my greatest friends and relationships today. And so that's what has lasted for me.
That's awesome. I have like historically had such a hard time finding joy in the process, right? Of the little moments of the journey and celebrating the journey. And somebody once said, it was like a entrepreneur who had built a huge business and said, like, what did you wish you would have done more of? And he said, take more pictures. And what he meant was not physical pictures, but take more snapshots in time of the process and the journey. So I even though that may have been a painful year, I think it's clearly fueled, your direction. So that's a really great story. So today, kind of fast forward to today, like you're helping executives become digital writers and build powerful brands online, essentially as a solopreneur, right?
Yeah, I don't really go by the term solopreneur because I'm definitely building things with other people.
Yeah.
But yeah, you could say that.
All right. Well, we'll say entrepreneur just to make sure we got our nomenclature correct. But so I love the good journey, right? And so I want to start from the beginning. We talked a little bit about athletics, but can you give folks an idea of your story arc professionally? Like what were you doing right out of college and kind of where did you go? Just riff a little bit on your story arc.
Yeah, sure. I'll start a little bit before college. I grew up with kind of two loves. One was athletics, primarily baseball. Since I was 4 years old, I was obsessed with it. My dad would roll up socks and we would throw socks down the hallway. And I grew up playing everything, baseball, football, basketball, golf, but it was very clear that baseball just was my thing early on. And I had two great parents that fed that obsession. They didn't force it, but they fed it once they saw the spark. And the other was writing. I just enjoyed as a kid storytelling. I enjoyed kind of putting words and thoughts on a page. I would get these journals in school and I would have so much satisfaction, like when I filled up a journal. And who knows what I was writing, probably the same 7 words over and over, but just like the love of kind of articulating thought and ideas sparked early. And so as I grew up, those two things, writing and athletics, were staples for me. And that led to college where I majored in journalism and initially thought I would have a career in sports media. So, bring my athlete side and my writing side together. I'm like, well, sports media sounds interesting. And so coming out of Carolina, I got a job at ESPN as a digital writer and editor, working on one of their early digital content products. Now it's ESPN Plus. Then it was ESPN Insider. And spent 6 years about 6 years in the media business at ESPN. Then I moved over to Fox Sports later to build out some digital content teams there, and that was great. But I got pretty burnt out on the media business, and at some point along the way, I don't know what the moment was, but I just had this realization that I didn't really want to spend my time commenting on what other people were doing. I wanted to be the one doing. I wanted to be building. And that's not to say that the entire media business is commenting. Obviously, there's a lot of amazing entrepreneurs and building that happens in there. But for me, it didn't fulfill something that was deep inside me. And so that led me into tech, going to a tech startup where I spent 6 years helping build that company, a company called Striver. It had about 15 people at the time, and I stayed and built it to around 150 with some amazing people there. And that kind of gave me a much different experience. I had a big company experience. I had a startup entrepreneurial experience. And being at a startup showed me the opportunity to take content skills and communication skills into the business environment in a much different way. And that's when I thought, okay, there's an opportunity here to cross these two intersections of business and content that I enjoy, but in a way that feels more organic to me. And so I can't say that like I had this perfect vision of what I was going to go build, like what I'm doing now. And even now, it's not a perfect vision. It's very much a work in progress vision. But I think if there's anything that I've done well over my career, it's two things. It's one, learning to really trust my instincts on when I feel something, and two, to be one step earlier rather than one step late. And so that is kind of how I have navigated my career arc at this point. And that's kind of where I'm at now, just in a much different venture and building my own things, but it's all kind of a similar process.
Great story. I mean, you have a couple of different evolutions there. One of the things that stuck out to me was, because of your athletic background, you had this need to get back in the arena rather than on the sidelines, which is really interesting from a kind of a competitive standpoint. I'm curious in that transition, what gave you the confidence that your media or writing ability experience could translate into kind of the startup product tech world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that I had any reason to believe it could, other than just the belief that I didn't view content as entertainment exclusively. I view content as communication. And so everybody needs to communicate. Every entrepreneur, every business, every founder has to communicate, especially now in this world. We're in a digital world. We're not becoming less digital. We're only becoming more digital. And so you don't have to, create content for the sake of being a quote unquote creator or gaining a following or being, famous on social media necessarily. But if you want to build in a world that is built on the internet for the most part, then I think it's pretty important to have communication skills on these digital platforms. And that's not to say, obviously, there's tons of businesses that are pretty non-existent online and do well. A lot of the bedrock businesses of our communities. But I do think going forward in the next 10, 20, 30 years, we are going to see a massive shift to businesses and entrepreneurs using content on social media, on the internet, to build awareness and drive their businesses. And so it's just a different line of thinking. It's no different to me than, going to a conference 20 years ago or holding a town hall, or, maybe in the 80s, the thing was, going on a big broadcast network. Like, you need to communicate, you need to have a message, you need to connect with people. And so communication skills are communication skills. It just depends how you apply them and where you apply them. So that's how I think about the space and where I see the opportunity to help businesses and entrepreneurs build is it's just modern communication.
Yeah, it makes sense. You can build skills or you can build, sort of meta transferable skills, right? And I think like communication, writing are one of those foundational meta skills that you can take to any line of work. If you want to change your life and do something completely different than what you do today, like, you will still need that. And so that's interesting, to me, in terms of, I think, like, how you navigated that change. What was your role going into that startup?
When I was hired as a production manager, I believe. And at the time, the Strivers business was a combination of software and services. So it's a training company. It trains Fortune 500 employees with virtual reality. And so part of the business was software, but the other part of it was the content, the training content, helping companies create that. And at the time, they needed somebody to come in and build out. There was no professional services. There was no content division. There was really none of that. A couple guys with a media background. And they needed someone to come in and start building out some processes, systems, and a team. And so they found me, or I found them, and I was hired to do that. But it's funny because, and this is a typical like day one startup story, within 30 days, I had a different job.
Yeah.
And I told them straight up once I got hired, I was like, you probably hired the wrong guy for the job that you hired me. But I think you hired someone who can do a lot here. So let's just talk about that. And so what my role morphed into very early on was building out teams, and managing people and being part of the group that built out what became the customer organization. So success, solutions, service, all the different functions you would have on the professional services side of a business. And we hired people with much better production chops than I had. So, but that taught me a lot. Like the experience of going from, because the question I've gotten a lot on my career journey is like, how did you go from big company media business to tech startup?
Right.
And in my mind, all the skills I built as a journalist, as a writer, as a content creator, all of those skills translated to tech and the jobs that I did, just in a much different context. They didn't translate on paper, like in terms of job or title experience, but in terms of being able to communicate, being able to work on deadline, being able to work with a team, being able to build the team, being able to set up process, like all of these things are translatable skills. And so I always say to folks who are looking for to a new thing or trying to figure out their fit, don't look so much about what exact job you've done or what exact company you've been at. Look much more at what experiences have you gained, what skills have you built, what are the actual things you can do, and then think about how can I just apply that in a different way. And that's what I did at Striver.
It's really interesting that you say that. Like, some of the work that I do is try to help people map out their advantages in life. And one of the areas is obviously like expertise, like what skills do you have? And the first exercise I go through is, just sort of write down, bullet point out your experience, expertise, skills. And it's funny, it usually comes back very sort of boilerplate resume looking stuff, right? And what you just said is so important, because the next phase, and really, this blew my mind that I would need to do this, but like the value is going in there with somebody then and digging deeper on that and saying, no, like what are the skills behind the skills that you can take with you and that you're really good at, that you can then press your advantage and lever into whatever, new experience that you want. And so like that context, thinking about how a skill is applicable in a different context is kind of almost like a creative process that I think people need help with. And so it's really interesting. It's a common theme. So I want to take either change that you mentioned. So going from big journalism to tech, or from tech to what you're kind of doing today, take either one of those. And I'm really interested in bringing out your sort of process of evaluating sort of how to do that, right? You feel something, you trust in your gut that I need a change, I need something different. Okay, we've established that. But like risk rewards, how to do it, like what was going through your mind in either one of those?
Going back to, when I left the media business and went to tech, there's two things that were happening there. One was I just felt deep down, this is not for me, what I'm doing now. I'm just not passionate about it. I don't feel like I am building and contributing in the way that I want to, which is not a criticism of where I worked or the companies in any way. It's just all about me. And I felt, okay, well, if that's not it, then I need to make a change, because what's the alternative? I stay in this and my heart's not in it. That's not good. And then I started thinking about, well, what would feel like it gives me a lot of energy to do? And at that time in my life, I was only 6 years removed from being a college athlete. And I very much was like looking for the role that athletics still played in my life. Like I spent all of my 20s really trying to figure that out, because it has been such a foundation of my life. And once I lost the sense of team, of being in a competitive environment, of having a mission to train for, that really rocked me in a lot of ways. And yeah, people say like, oh, well, you compete in business, and that's true. It's just different. And so I felt like this really strong pull to kind of tap back into that athletic part of me. And then I also felt an entrepreneurial pull. Yeah, I come from, on one side of my family, really a family of entrepreneurs. My grandfather on my dad's side, he was a Greek immigrant. He dropped out of the fourth grade in Greece and basically spent from fourth grade, whatever that is, 7 years old, 8 years old, to 27, just kind of running the streets and staying alive, staying away from the Nazis and fighting in the war, and came to America with no money, no English, nothing, and ended up over decades building a restaurant business that put 3 kids through college, and he had an amazing life. Like, he's one of my greatest sources of inspiration. And my dad grew up working in that restaurant business from the time he was like 9. At 16 years old, his parents would take off for Greece for 6 weeks, and they would leave my dad and his brother to run the restaurant business as 16-year-olds. And my dad's been in business. He's not in the restaurant business, but he's had his own business now for almost 30 years. And so the entrepreneurial DNA was kind of ingrained in me too. And so I felt like, okay, I had this experience at a big company. I want to go taste what building something feels like. And Striver just was kind of the perfect fit for me. At the time that I came across them, they were training athletes, not Fortune 500 companies. The founder and CEO, awesome guy named Derek Belch, he played football at Stanford and then was a graduate assistant at Stanford. And so he started the company initially to use VR to train athletes. And so I saw this opportunity to like, I can take some of the skills that I've gained and go use it to train athletes. Like, that sounds pretty interesting in what I want to do. And then so I just went for it and I think, this is one of the insights that I would share and that has worked for me is I don't really overthink things too much. I'm calculated. Like, my wife makes fun of me for this. My wife's like a through and through sales girl. Like, she fires first and then aims, and I'm the opposite. So she criticizes me for being too methodical, but I criticize her for being very inefficient. And so I'm definitely strategic and calculated in everything, but I keep it extremely simple. And once I decide and I go, and I don't waste time overthinking it. Because I just knew that, okay, well, something's going to work out. Like, I'm going to make something happen. And if it's not this, then it'll just be the next thing. And so, that's kind of how I've gone about it. I trust my instincts and I keep it simple and I don't overthink it. And that's really it, man. There's not a lot of magic to it. Other than just like not getting in your own way, and telling yourself no when in reality, I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is the riskiest thing you can do in your career is probably not take any risk.
Yeah, love that. This idea of overthinking and paralysis, and people who think that you sort of have like one shot or one path in life. And you seem to have this ingrained in you where it's like, no, life is a series of plays, right? If one doesn't work out, the next will. And it's just in some sequence. It's not that I fail and then I'm done and I have to mediocrely, move along. It's I have this innate ability to adapt and change. And I think that mindset is what prevents a lot of people from being much more experimental with their career, which is really interesting. In that, I think I learned that over time. Like, I've talked about kind of my break moment and where I went from like thinking everything had to be linear progression to, oh man, I can go backwards and I can go forwards and I can try a bunch of other things. And so that's like a really interesting theme that I'm hearing from a lot of guests, and you totally have it. It's just like, oh, well, and you probably got that from athletics, right? Like, just because you lose one game, your season's not over. You got to get back right up and play the next one.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter.
If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
It's a cool insight. And I think it's totally true in my case, at least. I'm anchored by a vision. Like I have values that I live by. I have a standard that I uphold myself to as in every part of my life, as a dad, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, as a friend. And so it's not like I am just kind of flying blind on a day-to-day basis. I definitely have a framework for guiding my life. My faith is a big part of that, and I've got a structure, but I don't act like I'm totally in control of the day-to-day and everything that's going to happen along the way, because I don't think I am. And I also don't want to be either. One of the scariest things you could tell me is like, you're going to do the same exact thing for the next 40 years. I'm like, okay, cool. Like that does not excite me at all.
Yeah. I say, a lot of times I say like, I'm a guy who never knew what they wanted to do when they grow up and still don't. Because
probably never will.
And probably never will, because I hope to God I'm doing something. I mean, I hope I'm doing this podcast because I love this podcast, but I hope I'm doing something else when I'm 60, because it's not going to be fun if it's not. And that's a two-way street. Sometimes I look at my, peers who have had one job and are really successful, monetarily and family, and they still have it all figured out. But I'm like, man, I couldn't do that. I could not do that. So I got to take the good with the bad. But yeah, man, I hope I do something different.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on something important too, which is everyone has to define what success means to them and what their journey is means to them, and I think it's cool. Like I know people, my parents, my mom has worked at the same company for 25 years. We know tons of people who are lifers in organizations. I know a lot of people, a lot of friends who what they value most in their life is stability and predictability. And that's totally cool. Like no knock on that. Everyone has to understand themselves and understand kind of how they want their journey to unfold. I just like to encourage people that it's okay if you don't know, and it's okay if you don't feel like you've got things figured out, because you can probably attest to this in your own journey. The older you get, it seems to become more clear that nobody really knows what they're doing or has things figured out. They're just moving and doing things on the fly. Life becomes, I think, at least a lot more fun too when you stop fearing that and you embrace it.
Yeah, you got to leave something open for randomness, right? Random connections and things you never thought of. Like you can't think your way to perfection, right? You have to experience it. Because there are things that are happening out there right now that you could never predict in your life that could massively change you for the better. And you got to leave some space and openness to experience that. So I love it. I want to shift the focus a little bit to today and what you do today and in your business and everything. So what's your focus today and how are you helping people right now?
I divide my time really in two different focuses. Half my time, so to speak, is building a couple media properties. One's called The Process. The other is called The Daily Creator. Today, they are newsletters. I've got some plans starting with The Process to expand them beyond newsletters and build them into broader media properties. So that's exciting and a lot of fun to, again, apply my writing and content skills, but then also with a more entrepreneurial and business approach to or mission there. And then the other half of what I do is I work with startups and founders on their social media strategy and content, kind of like we were talking about earlier, where this is modern communication. And whether or not you want to build an audience or not, I don't think is really the question. I don't think everyone needs to be a creator, quote unquote. But I do think if you are building a company, you probably need to figure out how to leverage digital platforms and communicate online. And so that's where I just lend my expertise and knowledge with founders and startups who are doing cool things that I'd like to support.
I'm such a fan of moments and decisions in past and how they, how they lead people to where they are. Like I kind of teased a little bit earlier that since knowing you, which has only been, I don't know how long it's been. Less than
last year on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You connected. Yeah.
Less than a year. I feel like I've seen you go from almost like freelance ghostwriter, pulling things together to creating like pretty serious impact and following through newsletter and daily content on LinkedIn and honing into leadership and process. And then to now, like within the last couple of weeks, at least launching, sort of this social media agency. And I'm like, holy man, like this is phenomenal. I love just being able to kind of be a witness to that. So it's really, really cool.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, one of the topics you really talk about a lot, you talk about leadership and process, and there's a lot of mindset in there as well. And you're really distilling a lot of lessons from all over the place, but high performance leaders, sports, and one thing that's caught my attention is the emphasis on a lot of the Navy SEAL stuff. How did you get interested or hooked up with the SEALs and kind of studying those guys?
Yeah. So I've been fascinated by military operators in general for a long time. I mean, even when I was a kid, I would read books about snipers. And I don't know why back then I was drawn to it, because I didn't grow up with the dream of being in the military. I was, like I said earlier, very focused on athletics. But I think the aspect of these are amazing human beings who operate at a level that's almost hard to even comprehend for us civilians.
Yeah. And
And so I've always been fascinated by learning from them. And so as an athlete, I learned a lot about mindset, about performance, about decision-making, about communication, resilience, all these kind of mental and cognitive skills. And then as I've just gone in through my career, I'm only more fascinated by that kind of stuff. It really speaks to me. And then a couple of years ago, I came across a guy named Chad Wright, who has a company called 3 of 7 Project out of Georgia. And he is a former SEAL. He's an ultra runner, which I'm now a part-time endurance athlete as a
part-time,
if you can call it that. And so I came across him and got to know him a little bit. He's become a friend and went and trained. I've trained a few times with their team. And it just was a life-changing experience for me. What they do. And there are a lot of, SEALs and non-SEALs. Every branch of the military has all kinds of folks now that are training people and putting on these kind of experiences, which I think is amazing work. But what they do specifically is they take you into environments that you just can't find in your day-to-day life. And they put you through real training that is going to build you up in a couple days in a way that I had just never experienced. Like it's a year of growth in 48 hours. And it's not for everybody. Like you have to be willing to subject yourself to that process. But that's how I got into the actual training with SEALs, and through 3 of 7, I've come to know other SEALs, and then now there's a great foundation out here I'm in Southern California, called the SEAL Future Foundation, which my wife and I support. We've had the pleasure of getting to know a lot of other team guys through that, and so it just feels like our contribution is expanding. We want to support. My wife and I are very passionate about supporting military and veterans, and so that's just a part of our personal mission. And then it just leads to opportunities to go out and do things like this. And so, it's an incredible training ground and an incredible group of people to learn from.
I've got a horrible memory. And so what I've always loved about the SEALs is like just the heuristics, the quick statements that stay with me, right? Like I know you and I kind of talked a little bit about these online. I mean, one of my favorites is for learning anything, it's slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And it's just this idea like repetition, do it slowly and start to increase your speed in any type of skill. And it's so easy to remember. So that like, I love how they do that, and they do it for a purpose, because in the environment that they operate in, the most stressful environment you could possibly be in, and you have to operate with like extreme precision and almost perfection, you have to be able to remember and recall some of these things. And I mean, obviously there's tons more. That's a very simple example, but that I think I could never do the physical stuff, right? But like the mental operations that those guys have as well, and how they train the mental side is just really amazing to me.
Yeah. And it's interesting. My ears perked up just now when you said I could never do the physical stuff, because one of the lessons that I've learned is that you probably actually could do a lot of the physical stuff. That's one of the limiting or types of limiting beliefs that we tell ourselves, right? And one of the things that I think we all need to break through in our own ways and our own journeys, and this kind of training has helped me a lot, is the power of our speech and how we use our tongue to guide us. And that's one of the lessons that Chad specifically teaches. He uses it not just from military experience, but also from his running experience, like the power of the spoken word, the power of what you say, the power of the images that you build up in your mind. And that has kind of been one of the most insightful things for me. You see these guys, these operators, and most of them take them out of their military dress, take them out of that environment, and they're just normal human beings on the outside. They've been forged into this warrior with these capabilities that are extraordinary, and I don't pretend like I can really even comprehend them fully. But yeah, man, that was one of the big lessons I've learned, is like, wow, I've got so much more inside me than I even know. And I need to believe that and stop telling myself things that just aren't true. They've just been implanted in my head for some reason along the way.
It's funny you caught that in my speech, right? Like, I mean, it's all relative, because I've been an endurance athlete in the past. I feel like I'm kind of retired endurance athlete, but I've completed an Ironman, and people come up to me and are like, "How did you do that?" Like, I could never do that. And once you've done it, you're like, actually, you could. There's nothing special about me. It's just that I trained and I did the work. And you see all types of body types complete that race, all different sizes. Like, you can actually do it. But even having done that, I'm sitting here saying like, I could never do what the SEALs did. So it's all relative. And you're totally right on the stories we tell each other. Like the most foundational thing that we can possibly create in ourselves is belief. And I talked about I wrote about creating a belief flywheel the other week. And like I need to tap into more techniques around self-talk, I think. But I'm slowly realizing that in all of the aspects of life, right? Like, it's like, I've accomplished this so far, and I've had these limiting beliefs. Imagine what could happen if the gloves really come off and the governor comes off. So that's really interesting.
Yeah. One of the traps here that I've definitely felt in my own life, and I feel like people fall into, is human nature, I believe, is wired to obsess about the outcome and obsess over like the big goal and the big vision and the prize. And all of that has a place. And motivation is a very nuanced thing. Different people are motivated differently. But one of the problems with that, from my experience and perspective, is it leads to overwhelm very quickly. And especially if the prize or the objective is big, writing a book, building a business, building a family, right? Navigating an extremely difficult family situation, running an ultra marathon, whatever it is. Like, we all face big challenges, big things in life. And if your mindset is oriented to focusing on that, then you're very quickly in a place of saying things like, I can't do that. This is too hard. This is going to take too long. This isn't easy. I'm tired. And you're done. And that's why I talk so much about being process focused,
right,
not outcome oriented, or outcome obsessed. And this is one of the techniques that they use in the military, that any high performer uses, any athlete, they teach them in business. It's breaking things down into manageable tasks that you can execute, and then stacking little steps on top of each other. I had a chance 2 years ago in an endurance event to put this to work. And this is why I like to go out and do ultra endurance events, because I know it's going to take me to a place where I have to actually put in the tools that I preach, or else I just won't get through it. And so I did an event in 2021 called 29029. And if you're not familiar with that, the concept is 29,029 feet is the vertical summit of Mount Everest. And so this ultra event is, you have 36 hours to hike a mountain, the number of times it takes to reach the vertical summit of Everest. And so I was doing this at a mountain in Utah. So it was 13 times up the mountain in 36 hours. It's like 30 miles total, and then 29,029 vertical feet gained. And I was probably 12 hours into it. We were heading into the night on the first day when I started getting hypothermia. And I had a long, long way to go. My body was locking up. I couldn't get warm. I was wet from sweat because it was hot during the day. But then once the sun went down, it became very cold. And I went into a little bit of a panic state. Like, I've got 6 more laps up this thing to do. Like, how am I going to do this? Like, I couldn't even swallow food. And so at that moment though, but because I had been training on this stuff, I said, okay, what do I need to do next? Was the question I asked myself. And so I said, let's just go inside and get some water. And so I went inside and I got a hot cup of water, and it did nothing. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to do next? I'm like, I need to try to get some food. I tried to take some food and I couldn't swallow. I said, okay, that's not working. What do I need to do next? And I kept working through a progression of what do I need to do next type of steps. And I finally got my body to a place, involved like a shower, involved like some treatment. I got to a place where I could go back out on the mountain. And for the next like 11 hours, it was just a process of like 15-minute increments.
Yeah.
What do I need to do next to just navigate this next little section? And that is, I think, a microcosm of a lot of life, where if I thought about the goal of finishing the event, I never would have finished it. It was difficult, but because I had in my tool belt the mental skill of breaking things down and then shifting my mind to a process focus, I was able to incrementally navigate. And the cool thing is, and this is another lesson, is the pain and the difficulty of a moment does not last. So how I felt like at the beginning of that story was not how I felt for the next 11 hours. Within about 90 minutes, mentally I was in a different place, and my body was in a different place. And so you get through the valleys, and knowing that, okay, this is not forever, this is just for right now, is another little mindset reframe that you can use when you're going through a tough spot. But it's hard to be able to do this kind of stuff if you're not practicing and training on a consistent basis, because the time to build these skills is before you need them.
That's an amazing story. have a couple similar experiences, like training for first marathon. I can remember just being like, get to the next crack in the sidewalk, kind of a deal. And then my first Ironman, I'm in the water. We got like really bad swells in the water, and I go out too hard. I turn the corner and I'm just gassed. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to complete the race because I'm shot. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm gonna even get out of the water. And then it became get to the next buoy, hang there for a second, catch your breath, get to the next buoy. And then halfway through, I was able to swim the rest of it, got out of the water, and I was good to go. And I finished the race. And I was like thinking in the water, like, I'm not going to make it. I might die here. They pulled 100 people out of the water in that race. And so it's just amazing chunking down and just putting how transformational, putting your focus on the smallest unit of progress, how that can be. And this isn't about athletics. This is about life, and it's about growth in your career journey. It's the same damn thing. So I love that. I love that story.
It's so true, brother. I'll give you a different example now, real quick.
Yeah, I want to hear it.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
We've got 2 kids. Our youngest she just turned 5 months the other day. She's going through a sleep regression. So if you don't have kids, you don't know what that means. It means they go backwards and their sleep is terrible. And just the other night, we were up. I probably slept for 2 hours. We were up all night. She was crying and all kinds of issues. And in the middle of the night, I literally said to myself, I just need to survive the next 10 minutes.
Right.
Like, I don't need to get to the morning. I just need to get through these next 10 minutes. And it just I started laughing because it sounds corny and it's pretty cheeky, but it's true. It's true. It's a skill that applies to everything.
Amazing. Yeah. Those are tough times. The sleep stuff, you obviously know, and my audience knows I've got 3 kids. And so I know all about that, but yeah, you can use this trick. You can use this process in anything that you do. It's just amazing. I love this story. I'm going to switch to kind of our rapid fire questions. Give us a little pause here, little different cadence. So, is there a recent author, thought leader, influencer that you've come across that has caught your attention, and why?
I'm reading a book right now called Do Hard Things by a guy named Steve Magnus. And Steve is an accomplished writer. He's a former runner. He trains endurance athletes now, but he's also a performance coach. So he does a lot of great work with organizations. I absolutely love this book. And the premise of it is he completely flips how we define toughness upside down. And it resonates with me because he puts into words so many things I believe about toughness that I just haven't seen before, which in general is toughness is not the outward expression of bravado and strength that we think it is. It is much more an inner combination of skills that help you navigate difficult times. So if you're a parent, coach, leader, anybody, I would read the book, Do Hard Things. It'll change how you talk to your kids. It'll change how you talk to yourself and how you just develop people.
I haven't read it, not familiar, but I can make some assumptions about where that book goes, because I think it absolutely agree. I mean, there's so much. The skills of resilience are all inner skills. And to build resilience, you have to do things that are outside of your comfort zone. So that makes a lot of sense to me. My next question is about a book, but since you already answered that, what's the book that's been most influential to you over your career?
The one that is really coming to mind right now is called Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Yep.
It's the best book I've ever read on the topic of mindset. And it's not just, about performance or athletics or things of that nature. It's how to build a growth mindset in yourself and in others. And I would encourage everybody to read that book.
What's your one piece of advice for someone just getting started or trying to get a foothold in this world?
Be humble and be consistent.
Yep. You talk a lot about consistency. That's so much a part of the process in the ethos. And it's an amazingly simple piece of advice. But you can pick up nuggets of it that works everywhere. Just the best plan is something that you can adhere to, something that you can be consistent with. So I love that advice. A lot of downers in the world right now, a lot of stress, a lot of layoffs and things like that. So I want to give our audience a little levity. What's getting you excited about the next 12 months?
I'm excited about what I'm building. I'm excited about the process. I'm excited about the daily creator. I'm excited about the people that the startups and founders I get to work with. I'm excited about our family growing. My wife and I were early in our parenting journey, so everything is still pretty new. I mean, we're going through the baby phase and now soon to be toddler phase for the second time, making memories as a family. A big thing that my wife and I talk about a lot is creating experiences as a family. And so this year, we've got a lot of things planned that we want to do that kind of propels us through the year and is intended intentionally to make some memories with our kids and each other as husband and wife. And so that has me excited too, man. I'm a pretty optimistic guy by nature. I tend to shut out a lot of the doom and gloom talk. I'm not oblivious to it, but life is a gift, man. Life's a blessing. And so I think there's always something that we can find and get excited about. I hope at least.
Love it. Staying on the kind of getting into my closing round of questions. I'm staying on the parent theme. I talk to a lot of parents, and I'm obviously a parent. How has becoming a parent changed how you view career, life in general?
I mean, I think it's cliche to say it put things in perspective, but I think cliches are cliches because they're true. I think it has just amplified everything for me. It has made me even more committed to the work that I am doing and I want to do. It's made me even more driven to, on a basic level, be successful and provide for my family. But even more than that, I think deeper than that, to serve in a way that I want to serve, because that's going to set an example and it's going to be a model for our kids. We talk a lot, my wife and I, about how do we want to raise our kids as people, and how do we need to model that for them in every area of what we do. And so that is how it has changed me. I think it's given me an even sharper purpose and vision for what we do and why, and the meaning behind it. You're or at least I don't want to talk for everybody, but at least for me, like the work that I do as an entrepreneur, the physical training I do, the events I do as an endurance athlete, everything I do, it's not just for the sake of doing those things. It's also to, one, make sure that I'm continually learning and growing and improving as a human being. And then as our kids get a little bit older, our oldest is 2.5. So she's starting to connect some dots, but she's still pretty young. But she'll be at an age relatively soon where she'll start to remember things and see why is dad out doing that? Or why is mom putting in that kind of work? Or, why is that important to them? And those are the kind of conversations that I want to have with our kids. And as a dad and a parent, I don't want to come to them from the perspective of me telling them what to do. I want them to see what I do as an example, and then use that as an example to make their own, choices and decisions in life. So for me, becoming a dad's been the biggest blessing in the world. And I think it just has this umbrella effect over why I do everything, really.
I love that. Lead through modeling, lead through example, rather than preaching, talking, making them do something. I think that's applicable to kids and just leading teams. So I love it. What are you most proud of from your journey so far?
I'm most proud of just the way that I have stayed committed to my own path. I haven't really followed the path of anyone in my family. No one was, an athlete, at least at the college level. My dad was for a very brief moment, but, nobody was a journalist or was, had writing as a skill or really, something they loved. My mom loves to read. That's where I got the love of reading from. Nobody moved away and went to college across the country, and then worked across the country. Like nobody worked at a startup, at least as we call them now. Of course, my dad did building the business, but I just have all along the way navigated and charted my own path. And that's not to say that I have done that myself. The reason I think I've been able to do that is because I was blessed with like two unbelievable parents that built the foundation and gave the love and the support to go out and chart a unique path. They were very intentional about supporting both. I have an older sister, my sister and I, in whatever we wanted to do. And so I certainly stand on their shoulders. But yeah, it's been hard in a lot of ways. And I'm proud of the fact that I've stuck with it along the way. And even now, like I am nowhere close to where I want to be really in any facet of my life. There's so much room for growth for me. And I'm 100% a work in progress. And so this is like asking me to reflect in like the very early innings still of a story, or I hope at least it's still the early innings. But yeah, and honestly, like that's a spirit and I never want to lose. I think we hit on this a little bit earlier, but just the spirit of continual growth and continuing to chart forward is something I'm proud of. Back to consistency real quick. I often say, and this is true, like I'm not really the best at anything. I never feel that talented. I never feel that. I never feel special in terms of being able to outshine someone in some area. But I have unwavering confidence in my ability just to stick with it and show up. And that is a skill. I got a buddy who says showing up is a skill, which I love. And that's what I hang my hat on most days.
Got a couple quick questions from audience. Jasper Pollock asks, what's the biggest shock in learning from switching from big media to individual content creator?
I don't know that anything's shocking. I think what has been the most revealing is it's the same skill, just applied differently. So at a big media company, you're trying to build audience, like you're trying to build brand, you're trying to build properties. You have many more resources, obviously, to do that. As an individual creator, or even just an individual with a career who's trying to build some kind of brand online, you're doing it largely yourself. But it all comes back to the basics still. Like, whose attention am I trying to get? How can I bring them value, and how do I communicate in a way that people will understand what I'm trying to say? That really doesn't change if you're an individual or if you're ESPN. It's the same thing.
Okay, cool. He also wanted to know, so you recently got kind of temporarily suspended or kicked off of Twitter. He wants to know what the food's like in Twitter jail.
Well, let me set the record straight. I was not suspended. My account was compromised somehow. And I was put in Twitter jail for 12 days, which was frustrating, but also probably a break I needed. The food in Twitter jail is the 5 stages of grief that you go through when you lose your audience and your access. I think I finally got to acceptance around day 8.
All right, excellent. Teddy, this has been amazing. I thank you so much for being here and sharing your lessons with us. I really thoroughly enjoyed catching up with you. I consider you an internet friend. Hopefully we will meet in person someday. Leave us with where people can find you online. You're all over the place, but where should people be directed? And we'll make sure we have all this stuff in the show notes as well.
Yeah, sure. I think LinkedIn's the easiest place to find me. If you want to check out The Process, it's theprocess.news. The Daily Creator is thedailycreator.news. You can see both newsletters there, but LinkedIn or Twitter, give me a shout. Would love to connect. And thanks, Mike. I appreciate our friendship and appreciate you having me on your show.
Yeah, likewise. Have a fantastic weekend. Give those little kids hugs and enjoy your time this weekend.
Will do, brother. Thanks.
All right. Take care.